Hello YouTube! So as you know, Christmas is right around the corner, so I thought I'd tell you a little Yuletide story. Once upon a time, aka 1847, there was a commissioner of wines named Placide Capot Roquemort. Placide was not a particularly religious man, and he was much better known for his poetry than actually his wine business. He was surprised to be asked by the priest of his local parish to pen a poem for the upcoming Christmas Mass. He ended up pulling his inspiration from the Gospel of Luke, and he composed the entire poem on one bumpy carriage ride into Paris. While it might not have taken more than one carriage ride to write it, Placide realized that his poem was pretty good, so he titled it the Cantique de Noel and began searching out a composer that could set it to music. He eventually came upon his friend Adolphe Charles Adam, a pretty well-known composer in the area who studied at the Paris Conservatoire. Adam was actually Jewish, but he nonetheless agreed to compose the music for this Christmastide poem, and the outcome was pretty great. Both Placide and his priest very much enjoyed the song, and it was performed at that church that year. Everyone that heard this piece fell in love with it, and it soon began to spread across several other parishes. However, it was not smooth sailing for the song. A few years later, Placide actually renounced his faith and became a socialist. And at the same time, the truth regarding the religious nature of the composer, aka his Judaism, caused the song to quickly become denounced by French church leaders. But luckily, the French people still loved the beauty of the piece and continued to perform it in their homes. It was in one of these parlor performances that an American author actually heard it being performed. This American writer was a guy named John Sullivan Dwight, and while I'm sure he enjoyed the Christmas spirit and lovely melody that the piece portrayed, there was something else that he saw in it. You see, Dwight was an avid abolitionist, and there are several lines in the poem that preach a slave-free society. Particularly the line that goes, "Truly he taught us to love one another, his love is law and his gospel peace. Chains shall he break, for the slave is our brother, and in his name all oppression shall cease." I agree, Dwight. Sounds pretty anti-slavery to me. Thus, Dwight made an English translation of the Cantique de Noel, and he titled it "O Holy Night," and he published it in his magazine back in the States. There, it was quickly snapped up by the abolitionist movement, and soon it could be heard in almost any North household and was even sung by the soldiers during the Civil War. Its trend in the trenches continued back across the pond again, this time in the Franco-Prussian War, a war between the French and the Germans. Supposedly, and I have no idea if this is true or not, but it is a nice story, on Christmas Eve in 1871, a French soldier leapt out of his trench and began to sing the Cantique de Noel. Apparently, he got through all 3 verses of the song and not a shot was fired at him. And when he finished, a German soldier jumped out of his trenches. That German soldier then began to sing Martin Luther's hymn, Von Himmel noch, da komm ich her, or From Heaven Above to Earth I Come. The two sides then called a 24-hour ceasefire, during which time they observed Christmas and, then got back to blowing each other up. As you can imagine, after this story made the rounds both in France and Germany and all over Europe, the French priests were much more obliging to have it performed in their churches again. Now, the Cantique de Noel and O Holy Night both continued to be very popular within the home and church for about another 35 years when something truly incredible happened. A man named Reginald Fessenden became the first guy to broadcast his voice over the radio. Now, as you can imagine, the radio attendants on ships and at newspapers were shocked to hear a voice coming from their radio for the first time ever, and so quickly huge crowds began to gather around these radios. For a while, Fessenden broadcast himself reading from the Gospel of Luke, but then after he was done with the whole birth of Christ story, he picked up his fiddle and began to play O Holy Night for the radio. Therefore, O Holy Night became the first song ever to be broadcast on the radio. Obviously, this started a very long tradition of radio Christmas music. Since that day, O Holy Night has become one of the most iconic Christmas carols all around the world. It is widely performed and widely recorded, and yet hardly anyone knows about its really awesome history. To have been written by a man who later renounced his faith and set to music by a Jewish guy, sung in trenches in both the Franco-Prussian War and the Civil War, used as an abolitionist war cry, and, then to be the first song ever played on the radio, that's a miracle in and of itself. I hope you learned something new and cool about this classic Christmas tune. Until next week, I hope you enjoy your holidays and that they're merry and bright, and that the next time you hear this song, you can imagine what it went through to get where it is today. Happy holidays! Musicology.